All right. What is up, partner up, and ecosystem aces? Chip, we're doing this.
All
We're
right,
doing this.
Jared, I'm psyched. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah. So this is the second time I've done a smash up episode. Did one with Adam from Partnered. Super excited to do so with Chip because Chip is he was to the podcast partnerships game well before me. You're in the 150-ish kind of range almost, I think, in ecosystem aces.
Just about, yeah, 140. It's crazy. I started doing it about almost like I think 3 years ago, and I just can't believe that it's continued, and just it's been fun. It's been great. Yeah, 140 episodes. We just recorded, I think, the 140th. So.
Amazing, amazing. So I think, today what we're going to be diving into is kind of like some of our favorite stories and lessons from like hundreds of podcast episodes. Chip's carrying a little bit more weight than me there in terms of the volume, but I think we're close enough to 200 in terms of being hosting and being guests. So lots of cool stories to share with you all. And if you're just tuning in too, I wanted to let the viewers on the Partner Upside know that partnerhacker.com is live. So it's a daily newsletter. Go check it out, subscribe. It's going to be lots of fun, just kind of like your daily digest of partner stuff. So partnerhacker.com, throw in your email, and super excited about that. And Isaac, the new co-host of Partner Up. But for this one, it's just Chip and me. We're going to have some fun on this one. Chip, you got anything to plug on the WorkSpan / Ecosystem Aces side?
Gosh, no, just ecosystem aces. Love to if you're interested in being a guest, or if you just want to subscribe to the podcast. So it's both on. We do it on obviously on iTunes and Spotify and all those usual things for the audio. But then we also have video, and we post a blog and all that in the community. If you Google ecosystem aces, it'll come up.
Awesome. Well, little known fact, Chip, the first company that I owned was a company called Market Aces.
How about that?
So like there is, I have to ask Aces, is there any gambling or Vegas in your backstory?
No, there is not. No.
Okay, I guess that's just me. I'm the one that's guilty of that.
I do, although, I ran tech ad I was with SAP for 13 years and ran our tech ad events, and we ran them in the US, we ran them in Vegas, and so I always have a soft spot for Vegas, although my game is craps, so not so much cards. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I grew up in a very degenerate household. My dad won the World Championship Blackjack tournament at the Riviera in the 80s.
Wow.
So he taught me how to
Pro.
count cards since I could walk. I've been kicked out of a couple casinos, and I have some friends that could attest to that. But I'm not doing that as much anymore. I actually lived in Vegas. I was married in Vegas. We lived there though, so it wasn't a shotgun type wedding. Still married.
Yeah.
So people that get married in Vegas, 8 years later, can still stick around. So, anyways, I just had to because see if there happened to be, because with me, there definitely was. There definitely was the gambling part of it. Well, let's hop in, Chip. Hundreds of podcast episodes. We can kick off either direction. There's a handful of stories I'm sure we want to talk about. Who wants to go first? What's the first one that sticks out?
Gosh, one of the things I thought that I've just seen it that I really when we started the podcast as an audio podcast, and then we were going to a bunch of events, and I'm like, maybe we can turn this into audio as well. And it was back in the days when we used to actually go to events, right? physical events, and so I was actually doing them live. I walked around events with a tripod. I used my phone, and we do it live on Facebook Live, back before LinkedIn Live came around. And I did it at like Sapphire, Microsoft Inspire, Google Next, VMworld, IoT World, like a bunch of events like that. And I'd arrange things ahead of time. And I love the energy because you'd have, I just do it right on the show floor and with
Right.
a mic, And it's kind of like interviews like this, and you have people walking back and forth and stuff. So that I missed that. That was a lot of fun.
Well, actually, what's interesting that you brought that up, I'm going to go do that. So this, I get this in every single time. I don't know how I do it. I forget, and then it just happens. So April 27th and 28th, SaaS Connect, the world's largest partnership conference. Cloud Software Association is putting it on. So go check it out, be there, and then you can actually use the code Partner Up to get $50 off registration because Partner Up's going to have a booth there, and I'm going to be doing the same thing that you're talking about, Chip. I'm going to be going around and
That's
talking to
awesome.
people and doing kind of quick format interviews and having some fun with that. So I'm sure that that'll be like a different kind of episode or maybe even a series that'll be a lot of fun. Um, so I'm looking forward to doing that too because definitely miss some of that in-person stuff. Um, I think what would be really cool is to, and I have a handful of these, is to talk about some of the things that like just stick with you. Like there's these lessons and learnings that you, I mean, why start a podcast? Why have this podcast? Why even listen to it? It's to learn. I mean, we've
Yeah.
been historically disenfranchised in the ecosystem role in comparison to our brethren and sisters in sales or marketing or product in B2B and B2B SaaS. But there's these things that I've heard from guests that I just don't think I'm ever going to forget. And I hope, my hope for listeners of Ecosystem Aces and Partner Up that they're able to take some of these things away. So I thought, given how much, we've talked to people and listened and learned, because I'm certainly the Socrates. I'll ask all the questions, but I'm not saying I have the answers. Maybe talk about some of those and like the first ones that stand out with me. So I'll start on my side and see if I can pick one out from one of your guests next. And I feel like the first one that really hit me hard was one of the first episodes is my friend Bobby Napoltonia. So Bobby was kind of the first major leader under Benioff for the launch of the Salesforce App Exchange. Um, the episode, there's so much good that Bobby throws out there. He's just a force of nature. But one of the first things that he said to me that really like kicked me in the gut was nothing changed until Benioff put at company kickoff three company priorities. Partner ecosystem was one of those bullet points. He said, I
Right.
was kicking and I was screaming and I was doing everything else. But he said, until Benioff put partner ecosystem as one of those top three priorities, that's like that. That's stuck with me since I've had it because I realized, wow, I don't see that being one of the CEO's top three priorities in a public setting often. And then you look at that and you go, well, that's why they're fighting it. CEO just said, hey, here's what everyone needs to do. Go do that. And then there's this other person over here saying, no, this is a priority. I promise. The CEO likes it. And I identify with that with so many people. And I think a lot of people reached out to me and went, hey, that's my goal for sales kickoff is to make sure that that's on the slide. So that's one of my first lessons is like, if you're going to have an ecosystem strategy, it better be on the annual kickoff slide.
Yeah, absolutely true. It's got to be. It's from the top down. It's from the top down. I mean, and that gets everyone's attention, and from then on, it's like, oh well, like then it's important. And Accenture did a study, a survey, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and it was what was it? I think 76% of CEOs that they surveyed said their business is going to completely transform in the next 5 years, and it's because of ecosystems. And so it is a CEO priority, and for companies that are forward thinking, that are really looking to make an impact and create innovative solutions and be a force in the market.
100%, 100%. Who's one of those first guests that stand out to you, Chip, that you're like, wow, what they said to me, that just kind of stuck with me?
I had, I mean, a lot of different folks. I had a conversation with Chris Morgan. I think that he ran the partner ecosystem for UiPath, and
Hmm.
now he's with Gong. He runs the partner organization at Gong, and just unbelievable. It was, the stories that he told about their growth was they had tripled the number of employees in 12 months. And a lot of it was, I think he said 20% of the company was focused on partners. So he said we were hiring 15
From a headcount perspective,
headcount. Yeah,
that's a heavy partner mix.
that's huge. Yeah. So it was around different regions, different, industry focus, geographies. And he said across the company, we were hiring 15 people a day. So, it's like, how do you infuse even just the culture and how do you get people enabled? What's the process? And so he talked through some of those things. I mean, just phenomenal, incredible.
There's hypergrowth definitely can teach us a lot because that's when things break quickly and you have to fix them quickly. So I definitely love hypergrowth stories. I think that the next one that comes to mind for me is another friend, Jill Rowley. So Jill is, I think she's duly credited with being kind of the inventor of social selling. So Jill's spoke everywhere about it. She's amazing. If you know her, you talk to her for like 30 seconds and she's already connecting you to 10 other nodes. Like she's just so good at like being on the pulse of B2B. And I reached out to her because I'm like, well, Jill wasn't necessarily an ecosystem professional. Like she wasn't a partner person, but she was formative in the ecosystem development of, Oracle and Eloqua, of Salesforce, of Marketo, of HubSpot. And I think she's one of the only people that actually saw every major MarTech platform get developed. Right. And she was like literally one of the first account executives at Salesforce, like the first account executive at Eloqua. And in that episode, what stood out to me the most about Jill was she's clearly one of the most successful salespeople ever. What I mean by that is she never wanted to be like a VP of sales. She wanted to be the most important evangelist for the company. And as a result, she could carry a big quota and crush everyone else. And how she talked about leveraging network and community and ecosystem was something that inspired me more than I think I've ever been inspired about this message and maybe rising tide. Like, you call it the wave chip, like partnerships is kind of having a moment right now. I think Jill is the one that pushed me to not stop doing the podcast because I was like, wait a second. Jill's one of the most respected she's like a company leader in general, but it comes at it from a sales perspective to where how she talked about ecosystem was just so natural and important because every company that she had a success story at, guess what? Giant ecosystem strategy, Oracle, Salesforce, Marketo, Adobe, HubSpot, right? So to her, it was just natural. And for those of us that haven't seen that story, especially 4 or 5 times, it's really easy for us to get jaded by that seller or that sales leader that, channel conflict this, or, they're just not seeing it. And Jill, I think, was a really inspirational episode to like share with, a fellow sales leader or a sales professional that's like, look, here's one of the best people ever at sales. Listen to how they talk about this because it's actually pretty inspiring.
It's so true, and I think it got to be a little cliche. The social selling,
Right.
concept. Like it just, it was like it went too far to the, like what kind of, I had a ham sandwich for lunch, sort of, meme. But the reality is, I think the essence of it is that you're talking about with Jill is that it's about connecting with people and sharing things that are relevant and important and valuable, and making those human connections, and that's what selling is really about, right? I mean, if you're going to be an effective salesperson, you have to build a network. You have to have that a network and stay connected to people and be able to just, text someone and say, hey, did you check this out? That kind of thing. Like have that kind of, sort of relationship with people that you can really build on.
It's a level of care that you can't fake. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm not sure that it's necessarily a super famous person, but Paul Chen said, "Passion never fails." And with Jill, you can't fake her level of curiosity and care, right? Like the degree to which she cared about her customers and the degree to which she cared about her partners was genuine, right? That's what I mentioned. Like in the first 30 seconds, she's already connecting you to 10 other nodes because there's so much value there that you're just inherently more willing to trust, right? Because the care level is at a 10, right? I interview people, I learn from them. I don't know this stuff. I'm geeking out on it because I care. And I feel like that's why a lot of people end up being wildly successful is that, like a Jill, is that level of care can't be faked, contrasted to how I've seen a lot of salespeople treat their ecosystem as simply a transactional lead source
Right.
or like, hey, what are you going to give me? Why am I even talking to you? Whereas like if you invert that, you actually get something much different out of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Really
Because you
great.
talk about that a lot. You've had a bunch of episodes on trust, Chip. I mean, that's a topic that I feel like you've brought up with multiple guests and like really dug in there because it seems to be a pillar of everything that we do is underlying is trust.
Well, the thing that's funny is it got to be a little bit of a buzzword bingo sort of sort of thing. I never brought it up. I never brought it up. I would talk about just we'd have these conversations, and it might just come up organically, or it might a lot of times what I would do or what I still do is at the end is just say, hey, Jared, you've been really successful throughout your career. We have a lot of partner folks that are listening. Any advice that you would have, and typically, anyway, the word trust. Like I think I'd have to go back and look at some analysis on the transcripts, but I would
Right.
bet at least 80% of the episodes, the word trust comes up because it is
I,
so important.
I bet if you did a word cloud, right? So like one of those things, if you pulled out all the transcripts,
Right.
trust is going to be pretty big in that word cloud for ecosystem bases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and you think about it, it's like what is partnering is, these days with the concept of sort of shifting away from the resell model, right? Used to be reselling. Now it's really about two or three or four organizations. So you have these company, which are artificial organizations, right? Are artificial constructs coming together to go sell something or to go build some value for the customer. Well, if you have an organization, you have things like NDAs and employee onboarding and stuff like you feel like you're part of something. Now you're talking about extending that out of your each individual organization. How do you create that? That's what it's all about, right? Is creating that trust. You have the organizational trust inside the organization, but now you're breaking down the walls. So anyway, getting a little philosophical here, but you know, it's
No, 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 no. I love it. What's another good story that stands out? I mean, you can take this in any direction. Say beyond trust, where you had a guest that just captivated you. You're like, that I'm going to remember that one for the next, ecosystem challenge that I encounter.
another one that I'm just blown away with is Tom Roberts. Tom is at SAP and runs it's called the Solex program, Solution Extensions and Endorsed Apps is what they're called. And basically, it's you know what's cool about what Tom did at SAP is if you think about the sort of the traditional SAP world, it was very monolithic and everything was built by SAP and there really was not going way back. It was all about SAP creating this whole end-to-end set of technology. What Tom did, first of all, also the proof is in the results. He's built a over $1 billion business for SAP. $1 billion.
Right.
Unbelievable. And it's all about working with partners and finding its solution extensions. So it's pieces of technology, whether it's DocuSign or it's other, it's solutions, open text and things like that, that fit into places within sort of the overall SAP, structure, but it bring more value to the customer. And it's about those companies working to creating a joint solution together and then working together to go to market together and close business together. And just incredible.
It's like the 1 + 1 = 3. I think that was episode what 97, and I think it's talking about title like how quality why quality beats quantity in software ecosystems, right? Like the ability to bring two things together that produces a more quality product versus trying to build, a number of solutions by yourself, right? Hey, we offer everything and it all kind of sucks. But if you can really, increase the value of that, right, to where you actually have not just a marginal benefit from a co-partner in development, but a almost, you don't even have to say an order of magnitude, but there is some exponent, right? Like, oh yeah, we can double how we otherwise would have won independently. Not to mention the fact, like, I feel like this is never mentioned in those calculations. Whenever you're trying to boil the ocean, do it all at once, from a go-to-market or even a product development perspective, is the cost, right? Like, and not only the cost, it's the opportunity cost. So let's say you build it by yourself. No one ever talks about the opportunity cost of what those developers or those marketers or those salespeople could have been doing in place of a really solid partnership that's actually better than what you could have produced yourself. So there's multiple costs to this, and I think Tom has the proof in terms of the output, and the ability to show that, hey, there's the other side can look great. And I think the thing that stands out to me is that, like, there are opportunity costs for doing it, all yourself, which is, I think, something that not a lot of people talk about.
Absolutely, and part of that also is the time speed to market. I mean, you can't, are you going to stand up,
Bingo.
I don't know, 50, 100, 500 developers to go go build something, spend the next 18 months to 3 years to try and build it, and then try and bring it to market? It's crazy. Plus, you've got, if there's a solution out there that already has a market, they have those relationships already, and you can activate that whole organization and get them working together to if you have a better solution together, then that's goodness, right? Never would have happened in the days of on-prem. It couldn't, now it's all, everything's
Nope.
in the cloud, easy, APIs can connect together, and you just stitch it together and go off and, off and running.
Definitely, 100%. What's another one that sticks out to me? I think here's a phrase, Chip. I don't know if you've heard it before, because I've only heard one man say it, but it's stuck with me now. I can never get it out of my head. I've probably said it 100 times. So basically, that's how I know if something's like messing with me. Do I repeat it? I'll give you the phrase: the market always wins. Have you heard that phrase before?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if do you know if that's attributed to any? I don't know. I've heard Sunir Shah of the Cloud Software Association. So he said that to me on one of our episodes. But I'm not sure that that's a phrase that is like attributed to someone in general. Like, to you, what does that mean? The market always wins.
It's always, you prove it out in the market. It's until you test it, it's capitalism, right, at its finest, right? Until you test it in the market, you never know if you've actually got a product that's worthwhile. So I'm not sure if that's what Sanir meant in that or not, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's 100% fair. The thing that like really messed with me was, and I think this is where my curiosity for partnerships really started to. I think that was like a doubling event where like I doubled my interest after that episode because he referenced Crossing the Chasm and Jeffrey Moore. So like one of the books that was on my bookshelf that I was a fan of, but the way he talked about it, I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm missing something and I'm not using this as a seminal enough read. Like it's not as much of a pillar to how I think about things as it should be. To Sanir, it clearly was. I mean, he said Crossing the Chasm is the best marketing book of all time. There's not even a close second. And I'm like, so since then I've like gone back and back and back, and I actually now pretty much agree with him. But the way that he was talking about it, the market always wins, made me think that go to market is backwards. And it really like messed with me because I geek out on go to market. Partnerships is a big component of it. But at that time, I every company I've been a part of, I've raised venture capital from VCs, small tier angels to public companies, Microsoft, HubSpot. I did the first ever public, investment with HubSpot, for example, PandaDoc. And every single time we've been putting together business plans or models, at least in hypergrowth SaaS, it started with us going to the market, meaning like, okay, productivity per rep, headcount planning, budgeting, finance, operations, like how do we make things fit within a model that we can then go be predictable on? It never started with the market working backwards to us. And when he said the market always wins, I went, I have been doing this wrong forever. Like I have been starting with my company and then thinking about, so like my marketing team, they start with themselves and then they build to the audience, right? So like their content, their narrative, their goals, their leads, like name anything, it's all about the company and they figure out how to go to the market. And I'm like, isn't the thing about partnerships is that it's opposite? We start in market and we work backwards to the company. And that to me, that episode just with Sunir, like my mind was blown because I'm like, I think we might be doing this wrong. And it's not like we had bad companies, we had good companies. But then if you look at the great ones that really nailed ecosystem, way outsized return, hundreds of billions of dollars, not a billion. So like that's one that's just always stood out because I've probably said the market always wins 1,000 times now.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, it's like your partners can be the proxy for the market, right? Because they know their individual market, whether it's a geography, a region, or whether it's a certain solution capability, or an industry, or a persona. Your partners are a lot smarter about, and they're trying to win as well, right? So that you can learn a lot, and really, if you can activate those influencers, or use them as a resource in understanding the market, so that when you're then creating your plans, that you're a lot smarter.
And it's not as myopic. I now have the perspective, like anytime I'm talking to someone and go to market, if they're starting from the perspective of the company, I'm like, that's a myopic view. Like you're not thinking about what's happening in market. You're thinking about what do you need, and then you're trying to reverse engineer your goal. And it's also a bit conceited to think like another stat I've rattled off way too many times is the average American is receiving 400 to 10,000 ad impressions per day, and how egotistical do we have to be to think that we're going to break through that noise and be one of those things that continually repeats and repeats, because that's only getting worse. And all of our go-to-market planning from a marketing and sales perspective typically involves around trying to interrupt that pattern that's already so noisy, versus recognizing that exists. How do we work backwards from that, right? So it's just like an inversion that has stuck with me for sure. I'm a Sunir convert, so that's why I'm going to his conference, SaaS Connect, and we'll be having drinks, April 27th to 28th. So there's the other plug for CSA. He is a force of nature. I think he called me a special person, so I feel happy. Uh, who else stands out from your side, Chip? In terms of the hundreds of partner stories, what else stands out as like a seminal lesson?
You know, I had a conversation with podcast with Laura Kaimi. Laura is chief. Actually, she's chief customer and partner officer at ServiceNow. And ServiceNow has just done an amazing job I mean, her personal story is interesting as well. She started, she was the chief strategy officer for ServiceNow, created this strategy of that was built around partnering and ecosystems, and then was like, okay, well, now you have a great strategy, go do it, kind of thing, right? And what I like about what's interesting about her sort of combined role, customer and partner, officer is that it keeps that whole organization like totally customer focused. She's like, customer is always the tiebreaker. Customer is our North Star, and our whole purpose in life is not to, like, we don't declare success when something's implemented. We declare success when the customer is getting business results that they expect. So I love that whole sort of message and mantra around both customers and how partners, like, how do you infuse that beyond your own company, but then have your partners understand it, pick up on it, and have it drive them as well.
Yeah, I mean that's there's a reason why you read these big biographies like The Everything Store by Bezos, and half that book is about a insane commitment to customers over everything else. I mean, the amount that gets beaten into your head if you read, The Everything Store is insane. And you don't recognize, you're like, oh yeah, we're customer centric. It's one of our values. It's what we do. But then you talk to someone that's actually done that and inculcated that amongst their team, their company, and in their ecosystem. It's quite the feat. Easier said than done. Um, it's not just a principle on a placard on a wall or in some culture deck. It's actually something that has to be lived. And it's always refreshing to hear to people that like have actually had the resiliency to drive that. Year over year across. I mean, imagine the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of interactions that becomes less and less true the more you deviate away from it, or more and more true the more you lean into it. So couldn't agree more. Let's see. Let's see. What else? What else? I have so many. I'm trying to pick the good ones. Um, okay, here's one. Here's one that's good. I'm also cheating a little bit too, so I have some notes, but I'm like trying to work the right ones in. Is I'm going to give a tactical one, so this one will be quick. So Chris Jenkins, he was head of partnerships at Workfront. They sold to Adobe. Chris said something on the podcast that just it's like what I've always done, but I've never been able to tell it to other people. He said, "Look, all of partnerships are about one thing: right person, right conversation, right person." And I was like, "What? I think I know exactly what you mean when you said that." Right? He's like, you have to make sure that you're talking to the right person, right? So you can't you need to know where to go in the organization. You need to make sure that you're having the right conversation, and then the you end that conversation with getting to the next right person. Right? And he said that is how you get anything done in terms of developing a partnership, right? So it's a new company, it's a target alliance account or a target new SI, whatever it is. You never just try to go to that. It's like it doesn't end there. It's just right. It's a feedback loop that never ends of right person, right conversation, right person. And it's stuck with me since he said it. I'm like, that's just such a simple way to explain what a solid business development person that actually has to develop new partnerships has to do. It's right person, right conversation, right person.
It's funny. The partner organization at SAP and so many organizations, I think it's like almost a mirror image. Like there's a revolving door. Like the people that were running the partnership for Deloitte, all of a sudden they were at SAP, say for 5 years or 7 years, they'd flip sides. All of a sudden they were over at Deloitte.
Yep.
Right, because
we're managing the SAP account.
Exactly. It's like we want all those relationships, all those people, exactly what you're talking about, right? It's about understanding the organization, figuring out how to navigate and how to get things done.
And get the referral, right? Like that's the thing is like I never end a call like even when it comes to hiring, this is how applicable this is, right? So like I'm trying to hire a rock star for any role. Like this is how I do every hire. Who's the best person that I know that knows where the best people are, right? So I go right person, start there, right conversation. Hey, I'm trying to understand, current status. I'm a little bit behind on this. Um, what should I be looking for when I'm looking for that right person? Get some details, etc. All right, thank you so much for your time. I know you're not on the market. If you are, let me know. But who else do I need to be talking to? And it's just like, oh, you need to talk to such and such, you need to talk to such and such, you need to talk to such and such. I mean, I've made so many hires that way. Where it's just since that episode, like a year, I think I've hired like a dozen people using that method, which is what I'd naturally do. But now I can explain it to anyone, and they're like, "This is it's simple, not easy. Like you have to do it, but not that it's simple, not complex." What about from your side, Chip?
So who else? I had again. This is a really interesting conversation with Priyanka Sharma, and she's at GitLab and in partnerships at GitLab, and just it was interesting because it was just a whole different sort of perspective because they do a lot of their sort of culture is around open source. And she said it's just a very sort of open source dynamic, and it's a focus on the technology, and that everything is it's a very sort of altruistic kind of perspective on partnering, which was really really interesting. Kind of a little bit of a different flavor to it, but.
Right. I think what's interesting is the all the different directions that you can go with that, and I'd actually love your because I think you've seen a little bit different, just kind of for context for the listeners who aren't on either one of our aisles. So people that tune into Partner Up versus Ecosystem Aces. Hopefully there'll be some more cross pollination here, which is why it's fun to do these. Is like Chip, I've come from the like startup SaaS kind of world. So like hypergrowth B2B SaaS. And then I think on your side, you're looking, my lens is probably a narrow one from looking up at the big players. And you've also been at the big players, kind of looking down at the development, seen both because, WorkSpan is a, growing startup as well. Some of the differences between, like what we'd consider platform and what we'd consider, applications, like that seems to be something that is inherent in a company like SAP, right? Or some of the guests that you've talked to, where is in my world, in the SaaS startup world, it's not there. There's people don't know how to think about platform. I'd be curious because I have a topic or a guest that I kind of define this that's really awesome, but I'm curious how you've thought about that, maybe application feature versus platform feature, and because I think that ties together very in an interesting way.
I think one of the challenges is that if you have the big platform players, it's hard to it can be hard to sort of get their attention, right? Like how do you as a startup get the attention of a big player? And I think it goes back to a lot of the same kinds of things, which is demonstrating value and having something that's really valuable. I talked to recently actually Parul Cheda, who's the VP of partnering for CoreStack, and this is exactly the conversation that we had. Like, how do they do a lot of work for AWS and Microsoft for the big hyperscalers, and they figured out a solution. They have a solution that helps the hyperscaler, but also helps the customer. Like they're able to drive more revenue and more workloads for the hyperscalers, but they're also able to do it at a lower cost for their customers. So they found this sort of niche in between and so they've got everybody's attention, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, this is really cool. It's good for us. Like they can work with all the the field sellers for the hyperscalers, and they love it. And yet the customers love it as well. Chris Cochran, I talked to Chris Cochran recently at Data Dynamics, similar kind of thing. They're doing some really interesting, and again, it's sort of having a little bit of a secret sauce, and then spending time with the partner teams and the product teams to get to find that niche and help communicate it to the field teams.
Definitely. And I think another way of looking at that it's one of the lessons that I hearing you just talk through that reminded me because I was trying to think like, okay, I had Bob Moore on, so he's the CEO of Crossbeam, which is a hyper growth, darling child of the partner tech landscape right now. Their content's great, so
Yeah.
they're just doing a good job because their content's good. I think they're a productive member of our growing ecosystem of partnerships. The way that he talked about applications versus platform, like it kind of kicked me in the gut because from a startup perspective, like looking at Microsoft, SAP, or Oracle, or kind of down, it's very different than when you're trying to disrupt up. And the way that he said it was like the best definition I've ever heard. He said something to the effect of an application feature is something that any one of our competitors can build and our customers would realize the same value. He said that's an application feature. And I was like, interesting. He said a platform feature is by virtue of being in first place, our customers get more value out of that feature. And I was like, whoa, that's why it's so hard for startups to actually build platforms and succeed and win, right? So for example, let's take a look at Stripe, who's, a more recent entrant, but obviously $100 billion plus company these days. Most of what they develop, there's more value for their users by virtue of them being in first place in payments, right, for their category, inherently. So everything they build is a platform feature because there's more value for their customers. Like you can copy Stripe's code all day long, but you don't have the network effects of Stripe Connect and being able to connect to tens of thousands of stores instantly, right? I was like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
platform feature.
Yeah.
Or with Azure or
Well, that's
AWS.
exactly. So you said the right word, which is the network.
Right, exactly.
It's about that. It's about the network. It's about having the network. There's a terrific recent book by Andrew Chen, who was with Uber and is now with Andreessen Horowitz. It's called the Cold Start Problem.
We just read that at the same time.
Right?
It's a fantastic book.
Great book.
Great book.
Yeah, but
Flintstoning.
it talks exactly about what's that?
Flintstoning. One of the analogies in the book of like using.
Flintstoning. Yeah, I love it. He talks about atomic networks and sort of the some of the stories with Uber. For example, where it was like, hey, we didn't try and conquer the whole world. It was, there's a train arriving on the 4th Street station in downtown San Francisco. Let's tell all the drivers to go there. Like it was very micro. To sort of get things going and. Absolutely, it's about building the network. The value of the network becomes, the value.
100%. I want to wrap with something that is, say, inspirational. Like I think the thing that we geeked out on when we connected Chip, like, hey, we should do something together, was recognizing the moment that we're in. So would you say that the partner landscape was the same, today as it was 5, 10, 15 years ago? Like to you feel like there's an inflection point where this is different than it was.
Absolutely.
What do you think in the past year
Absolutely.
or like guest or episode or something that you've seen that is really indicative of like, hey, this is a moment in time and this is not business as usual as it relates to partnerships and ecosystems?
I think the whole concept of ecosystems and partnering and sort of the transition from the traditional partnering, where you're doing reselling, you set up a PRM and you're trying to get your resellers to log into your system. The difference is now there's a lot. First of all, it's a lot more complex. The partner types, the way we used to think of partner types, completely broken down. Right? It's like you've got SIs that are creating products. You've got you've got product companies that are doing services, or there's just very sort of, it's more about the functions that people are doing versus now that I'm this type of partner. And then the kinds of activities that it's not I've got a product and I'm going to have a bunch of people sell my product. It's just like now it's about how do we put our products together? How do you and I work together to create a product? And maybe it's multiple companies, right? You've got a one or two or three ISVs, putting some solution together. You've got some services partners, that are involved. You've got cloud partners. Maybe there's some hardware involved. Think of the IoT ecosystem. It's crazy. Like every deal has, 7 partners all, putting something together because there are all these different component pieces. So it's just much more complex than it ever used to be, and the motions are completely different. So it's no longer just, hey, you log into my portal. It's let's find a place where we can all work together,
So it's
right?
it's a bit of maybe a more timeless economic principle that's finally rearing its head. So let's take some Schumpeter and creative destruction, right? Like the old model finally started to crash, which has created a wave of innovation, right? That creativity had to, like, it just finally stopped working the old way. It's not
Yeah,
working.
yeah.
And I think we experienced maybe a lag for a little bit where it was like, well, what's happening to where finally the creative thing has started to explode.
Well, I think what's happened with the partner teams never had budgets to
No, yeah.
to to buy stuff, so they were just like they were doing with what they could. So they were doing like using emails and spreadsheets and PowerPoints and things like that, like sending stuff all over the place. But it doesn't scale, and it's hard to measure, and it's hard to track across all your regions and everything that's going on, and track across all partners and all solutions. So it's yeah. If I think you're right, exactly right. It finally is broken down, and just people are like, this is not scaling, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of my business.
I think it's like after the forest fire, the seeds start to bloom, the flowers start to come out. I'll end with
Exactly.
I'll end with something that was really inspiring to me. So Braden Young, an episode with him. Braden is the chief partnerships officer at Sendoso. And Sendoso's a unicorn company backed by SoftBank, but they're a hyper-growth startup. But he changed his title to chief partnerships officer, and he was a co-founder. And I had never seen that before. So I've heard of partnership chiefs and global companies, of course, but never at a startup. And that baffled me. I'm like, I've known Braden for like a decade plus too. So I was like, did you just changed your title to chief part? I didn't even know you cared about partnerships. And I talked to him, and it was an incredibly motivating and just, I think, inspirational story, because he's like, yeah, this is go to market isn't the same. And all the things that we talk about in partner land and
Hmm.
ecosystem, just to have that recognition from someone that recognized that and adopted it at that level. We need more and more of that, and I'm seeing more and more of that. And that's why I'm excited to have the podcast, and I'm excited, Chip, that you have your podcast. So Ecosystem Aces, partner up. We'll do some more of these. We'll continue to see each other around. But if you're listening to either one of our shows, feel free to check them out. Partner up, partneruppodcast.com, Ecosystem Aces. Chip, you're on a bunch of different places. You're like on Sounder. You're on WorkSpan. Do you have? They can basically Google it. How do people from Partner Up find you?
Yeah, just Google Ecosystem Aces. It'll come up. You can also go to workspan.com, or you can go to community.workspan.com, and we have all the episodes, blogs of every episode up there on uh, with video and the audio and synopsis
I
and the
was
whole thing.
searching trust in some of the transcripts, and it was scrolling infinitely. So uh, it's been in a handful of the episodes. I couldn't actually tally because it never stopped. Um, but Chip, it was a pleasure. So for those of you out there, reminder, partnerhacker.com is live, daily partner email in your inbox. It's fun. It's a blast. And then
Excited, Jared. This is uh, you know, best of luck with the. I love this. Partner hacker, right?
Yeah,
Partnerhacker.com.
partnerhacker.com, the daily newsletter, and then it's going to be a full-fledged site. So just starting with the newsletter, we're going to be launching in Q2 with some big, big, big things that I think everyone's going to love. So start with the newsletter. Obviously, the podcast will be plugged in right there as well. And there's going to be a lot more innovation
Can't
happening
wait
this
to
year.
see it.
So
You're at the right time, right place, right time,
absolutely.
Jared.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody next time. Partner up. Peace out. Chip, appreciate it.
Awesome. Great conversation. And Jared, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening as
All
well.
right. We'll see y'all next time.